Okay, so this is an interesting thing. This is a special issue. Language of religion. Religions as languages. Introduction to the special issue. Religions as languages. A polyphony of fates. Oh, yes, please? Okay, fine. Let's see if I can get a hold of it, first of all. Yeah, because, let's just read this introductory things. It's 7 pages. It's, so. In the Sophiac Journal. You like language and God in the same conversation? That's cool. Then we're gonna do this. So, alright, so. Thank you, EchoBot, for advertising my stuff. I appreciate it. Okay, there's a link for this paper. And, do I have it? Let's. No. Let's clear this. Okay, cool. So we're gonna read this. Let's update the title. Let's see. Oh, that looks terrible. Let's try to fix this. That's still terrible too. Alright, what am I gonna do? Huh. Okay, whatever. Nothing. Oh, what'd I just do? There we go. Yeah, okay. Best I can do for now. Sorry about that, folks. Trying to just make this look non-terrible, but it's sometimes harder than you realize to do things live. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is language of religion. Okay, cool. And as always, feel free to ask questions about any and all of this. Alright, here we go. We do not choose our family. We do not choose our name. You can choose a new name, but you did not choose your original name. Along with our family and our name, we also do not choose the natural languages we learn during the first years of our life, our mother tongues. Mother tongues play an essential role in our interaction with the world and in our orientation in the world. Every aspect of our world experiences passes through language, even if it is just to say, words fail me. Thus, language modifies the world. Our world is a world that is said in a specific tongue. Since there are many natural languages, perhaps different languages enable different accesses to the world. Are there as many relationships to the world as languages? Is the so-called Sapir-Whorf hypothesis true? Perhaps one of the problems in demonstrating that hypothesis is precisely language's omnipresence. Language is simultaneously the means used to demonstrate the hypothesis and the object under examination. Another thing we might receive at the beginning of our life is a religious identity. The reception of this identity comes in at least 2 ways, a direct way and an indirect way. By direct way, I mean the presentation, more or less free, of a religious identity by the family group or religious order, for example, baptism. By indirect way, I mean the religious presence that marks the area, town, or country in which we grow. Okay, so we're getting into sort of like the history of your life. What has been with you your whole time? And so, in a sense, what has shaped you over time from the absolute get-go? We're talking family, you're talking language, you're talking the religion that is omnipresent in your area, because that does, by the existence of churches, synagogues, mosques, and whatever else you might have in your area. These things, mark the present in the town, or I mean, and the religious ceremonies you've been part of your whole life. This it does pile up. Author says, in light of this, one can infer that a religious message is claimed to be true only for the habitude of being imbued with a religious tradition. In most cases, the tradition of the family or of the birth living place. The constant exposure to this religious tradition transforms a religious message into an unquestionable truth. So the argument goes, the supposed truth of a religious message is a matter of self-delusion because it does not depend on the message itself, but on the reiterated and or coercive contact with the message. What happened right there? I don't know. Something happened. I make two observations on that. First, a religion can surely have a core set of truths, messages, teachings, doctrines that circumscribe the identity of this religion and its difference from the others. But this core set is not necessarily consistent, it is not a set of axioms, and for this reason, it is open to reinterpretations, rearrangements, and diversifications. Otherwise, there would be no history of religions, but just a crystallized and disembodied doctrinal recapitulation. Second, religious truths are universal in a very peculiar way. They activate only within the specific religion in which these truths are formulated. In other words, the validity of a religion's truths span across all possible expressions of that religion, rituals, discourses, practices, precisely because these truths establish the connection between the expressions and the actual existence of that religion. Therefore, the validity of a religion's truths does not span across the expressions of other religions. I will develop this shortly. Okay, so this is interesting already. We're going somewhere with this. I mean, you've got like whatever the specific truths are that are whatever that religion says, and then it's also that those truths are used in defining the religious practice, and therefore they don't actually they're part of the definition of it. So in some sense, they're not truths anymore, but they're sort of like the ground material of the religion. So they're the matter that makes up the religion. And that's a different sort of thing than just being some sort of like principles, but then they're also like the raw material of the religion. So it's not just principles at that point, it's something else. Okay, the same argument can be applied to anything uttered in natural language, and not only religious truths. In light of the plurality of natural languages and the specific access to the world provided by a language X might not be understood in language Y. Different hermeneutics are in place in different linguistic settings. Yeah, I mean, you've got words in languages that don't really fit into other languages, and so is like that particular experience really local to certain languages? Yeah. And so then, of course, does that also constitute what it is to be part of that language? Okay, however, for natural languages, there is translatability. Something expressed in a language can be translated into another language with no remarkable semantic loss, perhaps with the exception of poetry. The snow is white, and then this looks like Sanskrit, and then Japanese, and then I don't even know what this one is. The same message can be formulated in different languages. Between religions, translatability is more complex. Sure, the teachings of a religion can be translated more or less successfully into multiple languages. The evidence of this is that some religions are practiced in very different tongues. But translatability from one religion to another is a challenge because it is hard to find a common semantic ground between religions. Translating the snow is white across languages is easy because there is a common semantic ground, the shared empirical experience that the object called snow has the property of being white. In some, this common ground is the definition of an object of common experience. In the case of religions, translating a religious expression across religions is difficult because the object defined, represented, or conveyed by this expression, one or more deities, a notion of virtue, is not common, but it is specific to this or that religion, and it is specific because it characterizes this or that religion and its difference from other religions. Thus, the semantic commonality between religions is not linear. Okay, so what's going on in this? What's going on in this is we're actually talking about the varieties of religious experience in some sense. So we've got incommensurability, that you have multiple religions and you've got things that cannot be co-measured, that do not line up. So what we've got here is how do you say, the untranslatability of religious experience. All right. So this is what we're going at. The idea that, just like in poetry, that maybe it's hitting something very specific to the way that sound of a word hits a person that's a native speaker, and that might not hit another someone from a different language the same way. When you're in a specific religion and you have a specific sort of religious experience, that's not going to hit someone from another religion in the same way, that sort of experience. And so the semantic commonality between religions is not linear. Oh God, what happened to my ocular? What happened? Dagnabbit? Nope, wrong one. This one. So what happened is, let me get back. The semantic commonality between religions is not linear. So that means the meaning of these experiences, you cannot just draw a straight line between what counts as a religious experience for one religion and the religious experience for another. Like if that has to do with a god or a notion or a particular virtue. So this is what's going on here, is that what counts as religious can be completely different. Continuing, this semantic nonlinearity across religions is just the tip of the iceberg. Religions provide not only their symbols' meaning, the semantics, but also the ways of combining such symbols, the syntax, the definition of the context for these symbols, combinations, the symbolic combinations, the pragmatics, and in some cases, even the symbol's sacred origin, a sort of semiotic. So we've got like some sort of way these things have been oriented together as a group of symbols, how the symbols relate to each other. So it's like you've not got like a sacred geometry in some sense going on here. In sum, religions provide the rules of composition, the grammar, and the validation, the logic of their own expressions, either explicitly, for example, in a set of core teachings, sacred texts, tenets, dogmas, or implicitly, for example, in living practices and habits. Hence, the semantic encounter between religions is not linear because it is also an encounter between specific religions, grammars, and logics, that is, between definitions of specific religious why are they calling this a linearity? But I don't know. Between definitions of specific religious linearities. I would call this actually logos. In the ancient Greek, that's what this is called. This is called logos. So it not really experience. Let's, you know what? See if I can squeeze this in. Logos. That's what this is. So what we're talking about here is the way that the sort of account of the religion, that's what the old Greek term kind of meant. It's an account of how things go, but it was more than that. It was more than the grammar. It was how everything held together. And so how all this holds together is holistic in the religion. And so you can't actually do it. And so what they're calling linearity here, I'm just going to, like, you can maybe think of the Greek term logos, because linearity doesn't really, it's a metaphor, and I'm not sure how much it's helping. Okay. In other words, religious truths are universal in the sense that they are valid within and only within the semantic, syntactic, and pragmatic context defined by a specific religion's religious grammar and logic. It follows that each religion is not just a specific use of language, it is a specific language on its own with vernaculars, neologisms, contradictions, and developments. As it makes no sense to say that natural language is superior to another language, so it makes no sense to say that a religion is superior to another religion. You know, lots of people say one is superior to another, but that's only from the position of being within that religion. People just really like their own religion. They don't quite grasp that other ones are good too, but that's because, as the author says, they cannot grasp the benefits of the other religion because they cannot translate what the other religion is talking about. The issue of translatability is further complicated by the notion of sacred language. Many religions attribute to a specific language a holy status as the elective vessel to convey a divine message. Quranic Arabic, I apologize for how I say this, Lashon HaKodesh, Sanskrit, and Classic Armenian are just a few examples of sacred language. Yeah, Tower of Babel, completely. Any translation from a holy linguistic vessel into a secular natural language loses some of the sacrality of what is stated in that sacred language. Thus, religions are multi-layered, internally complexified systems of communication. Yeah. Well, I think everyone would understand that when you're part of a group, you have, like, you know, the group vernacular, you have inside jokes, people understand things. Well, this is the Tower of Babel for religions, not necessarily intellectuals. This is a religious Tower of Babel, but I think you've hit it on the head. This is part of what's going on right here, is that by speaking different languages, the religious experiences, the people can't talk to each other anymore, and they can't religiously connect to each other anymore. So, these reflections invite the formulation of the hypothesis that religions use natural language not only to convey a message through these languages, but also to convey a religious message about these languages. The message that no human language is to fully express a divine message. Thus, religions might use language against itself, so to say, in order to formulate the idea that, from a religious perspective, all human languages are limited. When used to express a religious meaning, a language simultaneously expresses its own religious limitation. It's not sad, I don't think, Caudillo. I disagree. It's just that, you know, as they said right here, there's only so much we can do to communicate. There's always going to be something lost, especially the difference between what I'm doing right now, talking in natural language, and what y'all are doing in chat as talking in, you know, chat text. A lot of you have to, like, in some sense, chat is a lot harder to communicate in because you lose all the, you know, I can use my hands to talk. I can use inflection. Chat does not have that. You have to be much more specific. And so the idea that we have difficulty in communicating things, this is not that's fine. This is the way language is. And the fact that religious language may add a layer to this, it's just another layer. I don't think of it as particularly sad, but I mean, you can see why, you know, religious people, you know, why there's fights among religions is because there is another layer to it because of how involved religion can be in a person's life. And when it's so involved in people's lives, then the fact that other people do not understand them at that point, that is a difficulty. But it's, in some sense, it's the nature of, you know, how wrapped up we get in our little lives. And so there is a limitation there in that religion is putting another layer on top of this, our limited way to express ourselves. Okay. Yeah, I wonder, like, I'm sure there's lots of religious communities out there that communicate over text nowadays, but it must be difficult. Okay, continuing. However, religions do not only use natural languages, but also other languages, lato sensu, that is, other codes of meaning, other systems of human communication. One of these codes is arts. It is difficult to find a religion which does not use music and rhythms in rites, meditations, holy readings, etc. Moreover, architecture, sculpture, abstract or figurative decorations, and various techniques of painting are all employed in religious settings. Another example is poetry, or more generally, the metaphoric use of language. Thanks to its rhythmic component, poetry is used in sacred texts, ritualistic formulae, and prayers. Also, religion interacts with other specific and widespread codes, such as languages of technology and of science. There are negative and positive examples of such interaction. The recent COVID-19 pandemic has forced the invention of alternative, technology-driven forms of worship and spiritual care. Religions might refer to scientific explanations both as challenges, as in the case of cosmological and evolutionary theories, and as resources, as in the case of ecological emergence inviting to reformulate interreligious responsibility. The Sophia special issue, Religions and Languages, a polyphony of faiths, explores the multifaceted relationship of world religions with languages qua codes of meaning. These codes can be other religious languages, and in this case, the relationship is a more or less harmonic polyphony of faiths. Or these codes can be natural languages, artistic codes, digital media, and science. Do natural languages modify themselves in order to convey a divine message? How do artistic forms of expression accommodate religious contexts? What are the different aspects of interactions between religions, technological advances, and scientific methods? The 5 contributions in this issue offer highly innovative, compelling, and engaging perspectives in this complex and fascinating issue. The first contribution is by Francis X. Clooney, presents an encounter between two religions, Hinduism and Christianity, in 2 specific forms, Vaishnavism and Catholicism. I apologize how I say anything that's not really boring English. This encounter is built in 2 moments. The first moment is a contact made by Clooney, a highly respected academic and a Jesuit, with the verses of Tiruviruttam, a sacred poem written by the great Tamil mystic poet Satakopan, 8th century CE. The second moment is the comparison between a verse of the sacred Hindu text and a verse of the Song of Songs, one of the books constituting the sacred text of Judaism and Christianity. The connection between the 2 moments is the attitude of the reader, Clooney, and we alongside with him, the attitude of the pilgrim. A pilgrim leaves the motherland to begin a journey in distant lands, entering in contact with people of different rites, different languages, and different texts. The pilgrim approaches this foreign reality respectfully because this reality contains a glimpse of what constitutes the pilgrim's own identity. After all, beneath the specific differences, the pilgrim still finds another language, other rites, and other texts. This contact allows the pilgrim to formulate new insights on their own language, rites, and sacred texts, and thus to deepen their own religious identity. This is precisely what happens in this article. The accurate analysis of the verse from the Tiruviruttam opens to rediscover the role of poetry in sacred texts as expressions of the limit of human language in conveying a divine message. Okay, so now we're going over like the individual things here, but like this is sort of like fascinating stuff. What actually happens when 2 things that you don't think should match up do find a way to match up in the body of the pilgrim, who is represented here by Francis X. Clooney? Interesting question. If you want to read that, we can go look at that maybe later, or you can grab the link from like in chat and you can take a look. But like this is the question. Is this the Tower of Babel, or can you go somewhere and find something out? Like, is it really impossible to overcome it? Probably not. You can overcome at least some of the incommensurability, the untranslatability of religious experience and the logos, the whole world. If you go and you try, you might be able to do it. Okay. The second contribution by anthropologist Lionel Obadia studies the cross-contaminations between 2 apparently distinct codes, magic and technological development. On one hand, we have magic, something that is usually considered, perhaps too hastily and superficially, a form of thinking which is connected with irrationality and superstition. On the other hand, we have technology and its development, something that is usually considered and praised as the ultimate achievement of human intelligence and as the most evident mark of the progress of humankind. By engaging these usual considerations and our prima facie approaches to magic and technology, Obadiah's article reveals hidden affinities between the 2 codes and unveils their unexpected facets, thus helping us recalibrate our approach to them. This article analyzes different layers of the relationship between magic and technology. Magic is a form of technology in the meaning of a way to modify the world, and technology seems to perform things magically, that is, in a way that defies all reasonable explanations. Where present, both magical and technological attitudes permeate human life, and both express complex symbol manipulation. The article focuses specifically on artificial intelligence. It underlines how AI development serves human magical need to transcend our finite condition, and it synthesizes the religious metaphors used in AI-related dystopias. This is probably a lot of fun, this paper. But like, if you have looked at the history of medicine and technology, the idea that we don't have magical thinking now is nonsense. All the old thought just gets like retranslated using new words, and a lot of it is just translated into the philosophy of technology. And we have not got away from magical thinking. I completely agree with whatever this author says, because it looks completely like in agreement with what I think about it, is we've gotten nowhere. The idea that we've gotten away from magic is nonsense. Like, we think we're all technological and science and like smart and we know the world. Let me let you in a little secret. If you look at the history of like thought, everyone in the history of the world thought this. Everyone was always at the cutting edge of their knowledge. Everyone at almost every point in history was at the cutting edge of knowledge of their time. Only in a few times where did they know that other people knew stuff, like where that you could go to the library and just like pick up a book and it was more than like anyone knew. But that was like the Dark Age. That was like a short period of time where we had lost information. Every other time, it's always been this way. And so the idea that like, oh, those idiots of the past, they were like, doing magic, those fools, that's just people being arrogant. It's just how people are. Like, you think you're smart now, people in 200 years from now are gonna think the crap we think we got right. They're gonna be like, oh, those people were like doing like that technology of the 20th century, the 21st century, those fools, they thought they were doing magic, and like, we know better now. This is just how history is. But like, the reason it's here in this in this journal is because it's talking about like sort of like a religious magic, a way to change the world. And is the technology so different? I'm sure it's not. The third contribution focuses on the interconnections between three languages: geometry, fine arts, and religion. In her article, Islamic art historian Wendy Shaw explores Islam's artistic representation of the divine through non-figurative geometric artistic means. She hints at the religious interpretation of a psychological disposition to recognize an affinity between geometric order and divine order. From this, Shaw underlines the non-semiotic character of geometric patterns in Islamic arts. The meaning that geometric arts convey are particular to non-figurative representations. Thus, in contrast to many 19th century European considerations, geometrical patterns do not constitute a grammar, but a potential spiritual message. The contribution reconstructs the changes in European interpretations of Islamic geometrical arts by underlying the shift from an etic concept of arts to an emic approach, focusing on the artistic expression of religion in several cultural frameworks. Islamic geometric art contributes to recalibrating the tension between the secular and the sacred. The imitative expression of the divine in geometric patterns makes it possible to retranslate a spiritual meaning into the observer's semantic coordinates. The contribution applies this non-semiotic interpretation of geometrical patterns to modern art by presenting a comparative analysis between the works of Iranian artist Shahrudi Farmanian and Dutch artist M.C. Escher. In both works, geometrical forms are not semantic placeholders. The meaning they express coincides with ideas suggested in Islamic sources, even though they are not overtly or intentionally religious. So that's like super interesting. What is the religious interpretation of M.C. Escher? Like, this is not something you would probably see anywhere else. The idea that the geometries in M.C. Escher actually can be understood as as having religious significance when interpreted more like the Islam, like those like unbelievably fancy geometric patterns out of the Islamic geometric art world. So I mean that's kind of cool. That actually also would be an interesting paper to take a look at, because it's art criticism, it's religion, and then how do you actually talk about this? You're talking about spiritual meaning and the semantics. How do you give that meaning in these patterns of the geometric patterns? Okay. Fourth, philosopher of science and theologian Yiftach Fahig leads us to explore the interactions and distinctions between science and religion, specifically the natural sciences and Judeo-Christian religious tradition. Fahig focuses on the distinction between language and imagination to explain the complex equilibrium between these two different expressions of human intelligence. As the contribution's title synthesizes, Fahig entertains the notion that science and religion are separated by their specific languages, but they are united by the common use of imagination as the heuristic tool to guide, on the one hand, scientific research, and on the other hand, theological speculation. Imagination is at the basis of creativity, which activates when one needs to conceive an empirical or thought expression, to confirm a scientific theory, to express hidden affinities in fine arts, or to formulate intuitions about the divine in theology. Thus, imagination plays a fundamental role in the investigation of truth in science, arts, and religion, providing unity between them. In support of this idea, Fahig refers to the analysis of imagination in the writings of mathematician Jacob Boronsky, philosopher of science Menachem Fish, physicist Thomas Pikleish, and theologian David Brown. Particularly evocative is Fahig's analysis of the story of the Tower of Babel, where the Old Testament exegesis meets epistemology and methodological reflections to unveil expected complexities in the biblical story. And there we are. We finally got to it. Caudillo. The particularly evocative is the analysis of the story of the Tower of Babel. So, you nailed at least one of these spots on, like right on the head. Boop. Got the bop. Yep. Okay. The last contribution by scholar of religion Andrea Rota analyzes the speech acts characterizing a specific component of religion, ritual practices. Rota harks back to the notion of collective intentionality. In specific circumstances, a group of individuals act, think, and/or feels in a way that reflects the intentions of the group itself rather than of its individual members. Religious rites may explain the emergence of such circumstances. The article focuses on the linguistic structure of Jehovah's Witnesses' congregational practices, and in particular the question and answer section of Jehovah's Witnesses' worship. Rota underlines that in this dialogical section of worship, it is a common practice to limit the use of the first and second singular pronouns in favor of the first plural pronoun. The emphasis on the we dimension determines a collective intentionality, which at its turn is expressed through the joint commitment towards active ministry for the congregation's sake. This explains the apparent contradiction in the empirical data collected by Rota between, on the one hand, the collective agreement to perform a ministry action, for example, door-to-door ministry, and on the other, the uneasiness to perform the same action whenever conceived as an individual act. As such, the contribution provides pioneering evidence for the fruitfulness of a real interdisciplinary interaction between analytic philosophy and the social sciences via the mediation of speech-act theory. Okay, well, this is this is an introductory paper, so I don't have a whole lot to say, of course, because all these other papers right here, whether we're going over them, they all would have to make their own arguments. They sound super interesting. But like, if we can go back, if you guys have any questions, if anyone out there wants to know more about, like, basically the beginning argument up here, where they're saying, look, how much does a religion actually change your world to make it something that can't be translated? And then they have these 5 or 6 whatever papers to say different ways that you could actually find connections between them. The semantic commonality between religions is not linear. It is not even clear that you can do it, but then these authors are showing, this is ways that we might think about translating what we can't really talk about very easily, and making sense of it. So, yeah, fun paper. I mean, not like it was a fun introductory paper, like for an introduction, because I think they showed the danger in the first half of the paper that like we might not actually be able to translate religious experience or practice into another religion or practice, and that would be a real sort of bad thing in terms of human experience. So sets up a nice problem, and then shows how, and in the setup of that problem shows the significance of the contributions to the special edition of this journal on the language of religion. Okie dokie. But that's it for this one.